I literally had zero contacts, Jesse, when I started. Like, I did not even know, how do I even find the VCs? How do I find the people with the money? That was me, right? And now I'm on the other side where I literally have investors reaching out to me now.
Welcome to the Startup CPG podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Freitag. I love that I get to bring you more Shark Tank content so soon, and with one of my favorite people. Today's guest is Sandra Velasque, the CEO and founder of Nopalera, and a very early member of the Startup CPG community. Nopalera creates Mexican botanicals for bath and body, and as you'll hear, have become a staple in my own life. Sandra appeared on Shark Tank last month during season 14, episode 12, and I'm so glad she agreed to come on the show and share all the details with us. You don't need to pre-watch the episode to enjoy the conversation, but I definitely recommend tuning in when you get a chance to watch Sandra's incredible pitch and how she gracefully received and ultimately turned down 2 offers from the Sharks. Nopalera also recently closed a fundraising round of $2.7 million unrelated to Shark Tank. Listen as Sandra shares about the process of applying to Shark Tank and preparing to air from the opening pitch to outfit vetting, how eerily quiet the time in the tank is, Sandra's affirmations and prep going into the tank, how her team prepped for consumer demand and the real numbers from Amazon and their website after airing. Sandra really gives us the nitty-gritty details here, and I love it. The process of raising $2.7 million, including valuation work and legal fees to expect, how Sandra developed a fundraising network from scratch, what's next at Nopalera, and more. You may also notice our intro music is a little different. I wanted to feature a song from Sandra's band, Pistolera. And this is Nuevos Ojos, which was featured in season 4, episode 12 of the show Breaking Bad. Now let's hear from Sandra. Hi, Sandra. Welcome to the show today. How are you?
I'm great, Jesse. So good to see you.
Yeah, so good to see you as well. It's great to have you here. And it was so fun to watch your Shark Tank episode that we're going to talk about today. I had friends over and everything that we watched it on Hulu the next day because we didn't have access to ABC, but we had our own little watch party
Awesome.
when it aired on Hulu. And that was so much fun. So yeah, could you start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and about Nopalera?
Sure. Well, so I used to be a musician. I thought that that's why I was put on earth, was to write songs and tour the country and make albums. And I had no idea or inclination or plans to become an entrepreneur, let alone a beauty entrepreneur. And it just kind of happened. It just evolved this way. I found myself unemployed at the age of 43. I used to, work in CPG sales, and it was just a moment of really self-responsibility, honestly, because, the funny thing about being unemployed is that you all of a sudden have time to think, because when you're employed and you're busy, you're just like day to day, and so it was this moment of wow, okay, I really am at this fork in the road in my life. I can either try to go get yet another CPG sales job and go down this path, or I can start something new. And when you have nothing to lose, it's well, what do I have to lose? So I had this idea to start this, Nopalera, this high-end Latina brand that would really disrupt the beauty space, which has, historically been Eurocentric, French and Italian brands, and kind of makes no sense anymore because that's not really who lives here. It's not reflective of who lives here and who is spending money in this category. So it was a bold move to say, hey, I'm unemployed. I have no money. I have no savings, but let me just start a high-end Latina brand. But that's what I did. So I launched in the pandemic. We make body care products, so soaps, scrubs, solid lotion bars, and obviously working on new products as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I must have met you. It must have been a year ago now. And, I was prepping for a call with you. I was listening to a podcast you'd recently done at that time. And you were mentioning why do we pay so much money for these why is it when something says a fancy French word that we're willing to just fork out, endless money for it? And I was like, that's so true. I was like, why when I'm at the store am I, I'm like, oh, that makes sense that lotion's $14 and it has a French name. And I was like, I need some Nopalera in my life. And so I put in an order and I've got my the moisturizing bar, seriously, I became immediately obsessed, and the Sharks loved it as well. But I remember last year before the summer, your email campaign came out of get your moisturizer bars before they melt in the mail, and I stocked up, and I may have accidentally purchased a lifetime supply because they last so long. But I love them so much. I don't really like lotion. I love that there's like not the plastic packaging. It's just like it's such high quality, and then the soaps and the scrubs, like, so I'm truly like a big fan, like using the products, like they're really incredible, and like they're amazing premium products. So I love that you've like, that you're bringing this to consumers and showing people that there are more options for premium beauty products.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So how would you describe like Nopalera's stage right now? Like, how many retail doors, like, what major retailers are you in? How many employees do you have? Just to kind of get a sense of where the business is at right now.
Yeah. So, I started and it was just me, right? I think it's important to say like how I started, which was just me making the products in my Brooklyn apartment. I made the products myself for the first year, which I don't recommend. I only did that because I had no other. I was like, how do I find a co-packer? How do I even find ingredients? How do I find anything? Because this was not the category that I came from. I did not used to work for Estee Lauder. I was not a beauty industry insider. And so here where I am today, 2 years later, is I have 9 people on payroll. I have a full team, VP of sales, director of ops, 2 people in marketing. We have in-house brand photographer, videographer, finance team, customer support, kind of like all the key things that you need. And we are now in, I don't know, over 400 retailers. So the name ones that people recognize are Nordstrom, Credo Beauty, Free People. And, the bulk of our wholesale, though, really comes from these 400 plus boutiques that are across the country, which is really our bread and butter in wholesale at the moment. They prepay, they don't require any marketing support, because they're very small and highly curated. So there's just less competition on the shelves. And we love them. I love that we have this channel open to us because as we're a personal care brand, but also a giftable brand. So these, beautiful lifestyle boutiques want to put our product on the shelves. And then really the business is like 50% D2C, 50% wholesale right now.
Wow. That's super helpful. And I'm curious how a lot of our listeners also probably know you from your distro talk class that you did when you did a lot of CPG, food sales. I'm curious, like, how has that experience and helped in the beauty world, or like how different has beauty been compared to, all the time that you spent in CPG food?
So the similarities are that you have to understand how people work. You have to understand human psychology because as a former sales rep, sales is really just knowing how to have a conversation and making sure that it's centered around the person across the table from you, right? Sales is not pushing an agenda. It's not tricking somebody. It's not trying to convince somebody to buy something from you. It's really understanding what are their needs and how can you position your offering as the opportunity. So that part is super helpful. And that's really important. That's just a good skill to have in life in general, because really what it comes down to is empathy. It comes down to understanding what other people need and how can you be the solution to that problem. And that's really when you're building a brand, it should all be about that. It should all be about what people need and what is the problem. How can you provide that solution? And then, brand positioning, how can you position yourself in the category to stand out? Because grocery is a great example of like, which cereal do you choose? The cereal wall is like massive, there's just so many choices. Granted, a lot of them are owned by the same like monopoly, right? But so just brand positioning, I think those are the things that I carried over. What's radically different in beauty is that there's no distributors. And as you know, right, from Distro 101, that is what I used to teach people about how to work with distributors. Because if you're a food and bev brand and you're trying to go into the grocery space, you're going to work with distributors. And so you're going to need to know how that relationship works. What are those margin requirements? Whereas in beauty, we sell direct. So that's kind of the vast difference.
Very interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about like deciding to apply to Shark Tank and like what went into that decision? Had you watched the show before? Was that something when you started, you're like, oh, someday I'm going to apply to Shark Tank? Or like, tell us a little bit about the background of applying.
Yeah. So funny. Of course, I've seen the show. It's kind of like American Idol, right? Everyone has heard of it or at least seen some part of it. But I didn't originally have any inclination to apply. It wasn't until I talked to a friend of mine who had actually been on the show, another beauty founder, in fact, Mabel from Luna Magic. And she was like, we were just having a normal conversation, not about Shark Tank. And she just in passing said, you should apply to Shark Tank. And I was like, what? No, why would I do that? Like, I need to go raise like, lots and lots of money. And, it seemed like a lot of work, and she was like, it's a great opportunity. You should just do it. And I was like, listen, what do I have to lose? Let me just at that point, and I still do this, I just apply for everything. And then I kind of forget about it. And if I get like a congratulations email, I'm like, oh, I totally forgot I applied for that. So I applied literally over a year ago. I mean, must have been like February or March of 2022. And then got the call back to, hey, we're interested to learn more about you. And that, from there all the way till you're at the sound studio, it's like months and months. I mean, it's almost the entire year. So much changed in my business, with everything when I finally got to, the actual studio to film it. But at that point, it's like you're invested, right? It's like you've put in so much time and energy, and literally just like the hoops that you have to jump through and the paperwork that you need to submit is no different than what you need to submit to investors, financials, intellectual property. Do you own the formulas? Who is your team? What are, all of that stuff you need anyway, like in a data room, if you're going to raise money. So I was already doing that anyway. So it was a lot of work, but it was work that I was already doing. And, I think the thing that people don't know about Shark Tank is that you can go through all of this process, like months and months of preparation, and film it, and your episode still might not air.
I can't imagine just how crushing that would be.
I know. Like my heart literally breaks for those who have gone through all of that. They literally go into the tank, they do the whole thing, and then like they don't ever get the email that says your episode has been selected to air, So I went in there with full, I used to be a musician. So I luckily had performing, in my back pocket. I was like, this is a gig. I'm going to perform on stage. I'm going to bring all the energy and treat it like a gig. And so I was just very conscious of the fact that this is a television show. And they're also very clear about this too. They're like, this is a television show. It needs to be entertaining, So I went in there with just, I'm going to leave it all on the stage type of vibe.
Yeah. Wow. And I think I read too that you did you have a really great affirmations process. Like you did some affirmations and everything before you went out, I believe. Can you talk a little bit about that mental prep? It sounds like your musician training really helped, but I'm curious too about some of the other prep that you did.
Yes, I prepped a lot. I mean, I already do a lot of, I do guided meditations. I have affirmations all over my house on Post-it notes. I'm very much about that. So I went in there this is an opportunity, not just for me, but for all Latinos, because we are sorely missing on this show. And this is the time, our time is now. And I'm going to make this about us. I'm going to literally conjure the spirits of all of my ancestors. I pictured my grandparents, on my father's side. I pictured my grandparents, on my mother's side, and all the things that they've gone through. And I mean, it sounds really cheesy, right? It sounds very woo-woo, but I literally just pretended like they were next to me, so that when I walked in the tank, I felt like I was rolling deep. I wasn't just me up against the sharks. It was my entire lineage, on both sides was there standing next to me. And to be honest, I feel like that feeling was felt in the room. And that's why, they were very respectful of me, and even when they declined, it was a very respectful decline. Like Damon John saying what I'm going to ask from you is going to be too much and it's not going to be good for you. So for that reason, I'm out. I was like, wow, thank you so much. I really respect where you're coming from with that, because you do know that what you're going to ask from me is too much and it's not going to be fair to me, right? And what I'm building. So thank you for removing yourself, And so, yeah, those are the exercises I did. And just, it helps to remove the anxiety about it being so focused on you, because I just made it not about me. I felt like I was a messenger. Someone has to go and stand there and say these things. And right now it's me, but I'm going to make this about us.
Yeah. I mean, your episode really did have just a really, it even comes through the TV of the vibe. And like you said, the way the sharks treat you and all of it, it's really incredible. So that didn't just happen. There was a lot of prep and intentionality that you did to show up in that way. So that's so cool.
Yeah. Because, it's a once in a lifetime experience. You don't get to do it twice. So if you were given the opportunity, any opportunity like that, where it's you only get to do this once, then, go there like you're going to give your Oscar winning speech.
Yeah. And how long were you actually in the tank talking with the sharks? And also, I think you mentioned something about it being kind of eerily quiet. There's no music in real life. Can you talk a little bit about just being in there, how long it was, what it's like without the music?
Yeah. First of all, they don't allow you to bring your phones into the green room. So then there were no clocks. So I literally had no idea what time it was, when I went in, no idea what time it was when I came out. And it felt like it flew by. I felt like I was in the tank for not that long. It felt like 15 minutes. It felt very fast. It was probably closer. I can't imagine that it was more than half an hour, honestly. And some people are in there for like an hour and 20 minutes. They don't put a cap on it. They just like kind of let it flow depending on how the conversation is going. But, I was fortunate to have other founder friends who I knew, who I could reach out to, who had been on the show to tell me like, okay, tell me everything they asked you. What do I need to prepare for? And you can just tell by watching the show, you know what kind of baseline questions they ask, like what are your COGS? What are your sales? How many retailers are you in, etc. But what no one prepared me for was how quiet it was. And I was like, why did no one tell me this? Like I'm trying to tell everyone now, because I just actually had a call last night with some other founders who are CPG founders who are contenders for next season. And I was like, the first thing you need to know is that it's really quiet.
That sounds so eerie.
I know, but it is eerie. And it's only eerie because you have to over emote. Like you have to bring the energy, like you have to pretend like there's music playing because it is a dead silent soundstage, and that's why you always see the sharks like cutting each other off and like creating drama, because you have to create the drama. It's not in the room. Like there's no agitation in the room. It's a soundstage. So that I was like, okay, no one warned me about this. I need to go yell at all my friends. Why didn't they tell me? But that it was a little awkward.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about your, like the offer that you went in with, and then kind of the negotiation process, what was going through your mind live as you got offers? Like, yeah, tell us a little bit about that and how it works to set an offer, because since it's for TV, like do producers input you, like, do they give you feedback on your offer? Kind of, yeah, all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And yes, they do give you feedback on your offer. And I don't know, I don't have any regrets, but I originally wanted to go and ask for $500,000 for like, I don't know, 5% or something. And they actually were like, you might want to reconsider because the way that the rules of the show work is that you cannot take less than what you go in asking for. So I was like, oh, okay. So I should ask for less and then like go up. You know what I mean? So that's why I changed it to 300,000. And I think the bigger question is about valuation, which is really tricky. The people watching, at home, they don't know what valuation means. They don't know what 30% of your company really means, pre-money, post-money, like those are all like industry terms, And so it was really tricky because I was also starting to raise by the time I finally got my film date. Like now I'm like in full fundraise mode. So now I'm like deep in like valuation and like dig into my financials, and working with a third party to like, back up my valuation. And so that's the hardest part, like how do you value a company? And founders ask me this all the time. Like it's one of their biggest hurdles when they're fundraising for the first time. How do you come up with a valuation? And it's like the market decides, like, what does that mean? That's so vague, because it's like, why is a Picasso worth $40 million? Well, it's because it's worth that because someone decided to pay that, and therefore it's worth that. I mean, that's a really kind of abstract example, but just right. That's kind of what it is. It's like, it's worth whatever people say it's worth, whatever they're willing to pay for. And so that's the tricky thing about going to Shark Tank, right? Where like Kevin is like, I don't think you're worth $6 million. You're worth $1 million. And I'm like, oh my God, please, So, but again, normal Americans watching don't know what that means,
Yeah.
So that was tricky, and I did have a ceiling in mind. Like I knew that like my lawyers would kill me if I gave away more than 10%. So I was like, we cannot go above 10%. And that's why when the quote unquote negotiation began, I was like, well, if you want more equity, now it's $600,000, And then it was like, let me tell you how the show works, and the mansplaining from Damon, which, to me just makes me laugh. But I think every brand has to go in there with like, okay, here's my ceiling. Like, this is where I'm willing to go up to. And I think the other thing that people might not realize, maybe people that listen to this podcast already know this, but the general public does not realize that just because people say yes on TV does not mean that the deal actually goes through. And so I really went in prepared to just be super honest. Like I didn't want to say yes if I didn't really want it, that, if it wasn't good enough. And so the producers, I think, are also trying to clamp down on people saying yes on TV and then like backing out afterwards. And so they were very clear, like, don't say yes unless you really mean yes. And I was like, okay, because they actually said your episode might not air. If we find out that like you're yanking Mark Cuban's chain afterwards, like we might not air your episode. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go in and just be very honest then, and that's what I did.
Yeah. And that's really interesting that you can't take a lower amount. I didn't realize that. That's really interesting that you got that feedback in advance. And also I think, I think it's so cool that you stuck to your offer as well, because your brand is so all over your branding is stand in your worth. And for you to go out there and stand in your worth, like, I think that message, like you said, about being it more beyond more than just you, like the inspiration that you gave to people of that as well, and not making your attorneys upset as well.
I was literally like, she's going to kill me if I say yes to this. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And how, I want to dig into this a little bit more later, but for context too, like, you mentioned that you were fundraising, by the time you're filming the episode, like, when did you start fundraising compared to when you applied to the show? Like, how did the timing of that kind of dual track with Shark Tank airing? And then we can dig into that more later, but kind of curious on the context.
Yeah. So the timing was that I applied for Shark Tank really early in the year, like, March, maybe even February, honestly, like early 2022. I didn't start fundraising until like the end of June. So it was much later in the process, and of course the producers are always like asking you every time they meet with you on Zoom, they're asking you for an update. Like, have you taken investment yet? Has your cap table changed? Has anything changed? So it was much later. And, then I filmed at the end of July. At that point, I was like in full fundraise mode because, again, a lot that happens in the tank doesn't make it to the final episode. And so we did talk about that in the tank. Like Mark Cuban asked me, do you have any offers right now from other investors? And I said, I have a lot of strong interest, which was true at that time in July. And it wasn't until, the beginning of September, so like a month later, that I had, a lead investor say like, okay, we want to be the lead. And then of course the angels follow after that. So everything kind of happened in September, like a month and a half after I filmed, is when I, and I think I closed my seed round in October officially. So that was kind of the timeline of it.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. And you ultimately raised $2.7 million. Yeah. Is that right?
Yes, 2.7. Okay. And I also like to tell people, be super transparent about this because no one talks about this. When you hear about people raising money, like, okay, I raised 2.7 million, $100,000 goes to legal right out the door. So there's never 2.7 in the bank. So let's be clear about that.
Yeah, no,
no one talks about the legal bill. Point. Yes. No one talks about the legal bill. Yeah.
And you mentioned that you got some third-party valuation, which assessments, which I think is really interesting because, like you said, so often like when I worked a little bit in the angel investing world, it was just like all over the place. Like some investors would have, back of the napkin math that they would do. Some were just kind of like gut feel, or they're like, well, how much do you want to raise? And then come up with a number that sounds kind of reasonable to us. Like it was just so arbitrary. So was that an expensive process as well? But did you feel like it was worth it to kind of give you some confidence in going into Shark Tank and fundraising?
Yeah. So that last part, right? It's really about that. It's really about giving you the confidence to like back up your valuation anywhere, Shark Tank to investors, VCs, right? And, I don't have regrets about doing it. It wasn't actually that expensive, to be honest with you. And it wasn't my idea to do it. It was actually my first lawyer. I actually had to change lawyers in the middle of my fundraise to like a bigger firm. But my first lawyer was the one that recommended it. And when I asked other VCs, hey, do you ever ask the brands that you're investing in to go out and get like third party, valuation assessments? And they're like, no, never. Don't spend your money on that. But my lawyer really pushed for it. And it was really just about that point that you brought up. It's really just about you being able to have the confidence, like you've seen the research of the market, you've seen the market comps, because they have access to data that us plebeians do not, they have access to like more insider, market comps. But unfortunately, a lot of companies are still private. So like the data is not available. And so therefore it kind of fell short a little bit, but it still it was still valuable. It's like, I don't regret it. I can't say that I would recommend, like I wouldn't like go out and tell every founder to go like get a third party valuation. So, and also the people that I worked with were kind of like generalist, right? So like they didn't really know beauty, so it was like, I had to really guide them on like, here are the brands I need you to pull data from.
Mm.
And that was challenging because not everyone had data available.
Yeah, that's super help. I appreciate you sharing about that though, because it's helpful to know that you did that in the process. And yeah, valuation is such a tricky topic, as you mentioned. That's such a common question.
Yeah.
So yeah, just appreciate you sharing a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And also, as far as as Shark Tank, I'm curious a little bit about the response from consumers. And both, like, I listened to your episode on your podcast, which I highly recommend, and I'll link in the show notes, one of my
Thank you.
favorite podcasts, where you and your marketing team talked about prepping for the show and kind of like getting numbers from other founders of like, okay, do we think it's going to be this many orders, this many orders, this many orders? And then I noticed that you did eventually sell out of your Shark Tank bundle.
Yeah.
On your,
Yeah.
not eventually, but like I saw you in a negative way, but I saw you sell out because I know you've done so much prep. So can you tell us a little bit about like the prep and then the actual and what you thought about that process?
Yeah. Again, rarely fortunate to have a network of other founders that I can go to and say like, what's going to happen here? Like, what should we be preparing for? And literally the answers were like, the range was so wide. I talked to, because I'm in the Target Accelerator alumni Slack channel. So, I asked in there. I'm in the New Voices Foundation Slack channel. I asked in there, and there's founders in both that have been on the show. And so one founder said that she only received 1,000 orders after the show. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was definitely on the lower side. Most founders told me to expect around 3,000 orders. So that's what we were preparing for. We were like, I told my ops, director of ops, I was like, okay, we need to have 3,000 of everything available. And so that's what we had. And then our warehouse, our 3PL called and they were like, oh no, you guys it's going to be way more than that. You should expect double that. They said we had a baby brand, like a brand that sold baby clothes, and they had 7,000 orders. So I was like, oh crap, like we don't have enough. We're going to run out. So, we had our director of ops like double the existing purchase orders that were already out to our co-packers. So we were prepared with inventory to have 10,000 of everything just to like be safe. And we ultimately ended up getting 6,000 orders from January 20th to February 1st. So it was more than 3,000. It wasn't quite 10,000, but it was, I'm glad that we upped it, right? That we upped our preparation. And that was really split between Shopify and Amazon. So we definitely got, it was kind of 50-50, honestly. It was like 3,000 orders Shopify, 3,000 orders Amazon. And then of course our retail partners also saw a huge lift. Like Nordstrom and Credo had like a, 300% increase in orders as well.
Wow.
So that's good for, that was great for us with those retail partners. It was really about the preparation to make sure nothing broke, not even just inventory, but like, is your SMS set up? Are your email flows, like, are they set up to talk to like new people who have no idea who you are? Give them some education, like what is a nopal, whatever. And, make sure that our customer support agent like was going to be like online, make sure that like our ticketing platform, everything, like, do we need to update our FAQs? Like we updated our website, like, FAQs, product pages. We had our photographer like make new videos of like how to use the lotion bar, how to use the scrub, put those on the PDPs. So that's the kind of preparation we did, which I think worked really well. And I'm glad we did all of that. Obviously, the more you get of everything, right? So the most popular item was definitely our lotion bar. It was also the most returned item on Amazon because people just don't know what a lotion bar is,
Oh.
And there's a lot of customer education that is required. And anyone out there that has a product, in CPG as well that requires customer education, they know that it's like a really heavy lift to teach people how a new thing works or what it does. So I don't know what people were expecting. They thought it was going to be like a roll-on. You know what I mean? Like people were like, it doesn't glide. I'm like, did you think this is like a dry idea deodorant that's going to glide on your skin? Like this is a natural product,
Yeah.
But obviously, it's always easy to focus on like negative, reviews, but overwhelmingly positive, right? So still like, we did about 300,000 in sales, for that from like January 20th to like February 1st.
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. And I found it really interesting when you were talking with your team on your show about prepping. I thought it was such a good angle that you mentioned as well of just like, okay, often people are finding like, what lens do I need to look at our emails, our website, everything through as someone who just saw this on television? They may not even have social media or have seen this on social media, so they have no context. Like, how do I look at everything with those eyes?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's so interesting because, your other maybe normal, customer flows are totally different. Somebody that just saw it on TV and is like, oh, that lotion bar looked cool.
Yeah.
They need so much more education and such a different journey. So that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. You do have to, I think periodically it's good for every company to just even quarterly, I guess, at the minimum, like comb through all of your assets, your website, your flows to make sure that they are still relevant, that they're really talking to the people that they're meant to talk to and, all of that
Yeah.
ongoing.
And speaking of Amazon, is that something that you set up knowing that you might air on Shark Tank, or how did you think about Amazon? Was that a channel you'd been in before, and what kind of prep went into prepping Amazon for Shark Tank?
Yeah, Amazon was not on our roadmap. I actually was not planning to launch on Amazon until like this year. And, once I was going through the process of Shark Tank and it felt positive, like, okay, I think I'm moving forward to the final round. Like, and by the way, they never really tell you what round you're in. you're like, am I in the finals right now? Like, have I made it yet? And like, they literally tell you till the moment you air that like your episode might not air. Like they have to keep reminding you. It's so nerve wracking. I'm like, can we tell people? Are we allowed to promote this yet? Like, I don't understand. Even in the congratulations email, Jesse, it was like, congratulations, your episode has been scheduled to air. Your episode might not air. Like,
Oh my
they still
gosh.
have to tell you that. But so Amazon, my other founder friends who, were on the show were like, you have got to be on Amazon. Like everyone's going to go there. You're going to lose thousands of dollars if you're not on Amazon. So I reached out to my good friend, Jessie Freitag of the Startup CPG podcast. And I asked her for any recommendations for an Amazon agency. And she recommended one who was really good. And so I had no bandwidth to like run Amazon myself. I mean, this was like back in September. I was like literally in the middle of fundraising, like trying to close this deal. I was in like 5 million accelerators. I was like a team of 2. And so back then, thank God for the agency. Like, here's all the assets, here's all the pictures, and they built the page, they got it up and running. We got the inventory there and, started to spend a little bit on ads, like not very much compared to what we spend, on the D2C side. And thank God it worked, like again, $90,000 just from Amazon because of Shark Tank, and now it's like at a new level. Like now it's like consistently at like $1,000 a day, like with us not really having to do anything just because it's just been the brand awareness is there. And I guess the algorithm, honestly, I haven't tried to shop for myself on Amazon yet, but so that's cool, right? It's like obviously the big buzz dies down at some point, but like you're at a new plateau than you were before.
Yeah, sets you at that higher bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because when you said that the sales were kind of split 50-50 between Amazon and your website, that was way more for Amazon than I was expecting. So that's wow.
Yeah. And I mean, I will say like it's 50-50 in terms of number of orders, but in terms of dollar value, much higher on our Shopify site because the average order value is so much higher. And on Amazon, people are buying like one thing.
Yeah.
I think like the average, units per order is like 1.2 or something. Like maybe people are buying 2 things, but people are mostly buying like one item. Whereas on Shopify, they're buying like the bundle, right? It's like $130. And so much higher average order value.
And were most the orders for your bundle that you just mentioned, or were people did you see a mix, or did a lot of people go for that bundle? And what kind of thinking went into that? Where I see founders, often put together like a bundle for Shark Tank. So kind of curious about that.
Yeah, I once we got the the green light that it was going to air / maybe not air.
Yeah,
I was like, okay, we have to make because I knew how the episode went. I was like,
right.
I know that I said this is how I know how it ends. So let's create a bundle that like is about that. And because we just don't have that many SKUs, I was like, let's just put all of our SKUs in it. It's literally like our entire line, with the exception of like merch. And I think, a lot of people bought the bundle. A lot of people bought the bundle because they're just so excited. They're like, it's just an easy click. It's like one click. They don't have to think. And a lot of people, if they didn't buy the bundle, they bought another bath set, which is again like 3 items. So not really, people don't really come to our website to buy like one item.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah. Very interesting. I also, this is going back a little bit to Shark Tank, but I had heard when we had Rosa from Wild Wonder on the podcast about Shark Tank, she was saying that your like first couple minute pitch, like that all is like pre-done. And like, they're like paying attention to like what you're going to wear and like can you talk a little bit about some of the like vetting, what it looks like to get that first couple minutes of your pitch together? Cause that was really interesting to me that I was like, well, yeah, you are on national TV and they don't want to cut that have any cuts in there. So it has to be just the way, has to be okayed to be on the airwaves.
Yes. And, to your point of like the vetting, I mean, I had to submit pictures of my tattoos, Jesse.
Oh
Like,
my gosh.
I think they need to make sure my tattoos don't say like a curse word, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or it doesn't have like a
Yeah.
swastika or something, you know what I mean? So, and they only asked me to do that because I was in California at the time and for the like in the month of the filming. And so I got to drive to the studio to drop off my display. Like most people have to mail it in. I just drove up from San Diego and I just dropped off my, my cactus and whatever. And so they saw me in a tank top. And so they saw my tattoos. And then they were like, oh, can you send us pictures of your tattoos? But yeah, everything is vetted. They need like 3 outfit choices. Like there's a Google folder with the pictures of your outfits, because they also need to make sure that it works on camera, like no stripes, no polka dots,
Right.
nothing that's going to, I forget the word, but it warps the camera. Like it's like moire or something. I forget the word. But anyway, everything is vetted. The pitch, to your point, is 100% rehearsed, like perfected, memorized, and so the trick is like you have to make it come across natural. Like you're just walking in and being like, hey, sharks,
Yeah.
I'm Sandra. And here are my thoughts for today. It's not that at all. It's completely rehearsed, completely memorized and crafted, right? So you get to first draft the first pitch and then like your producers that you're assigned to like help you cut it down or edit it or like refine it. But a lot of what I originally wrote is like in there, and I noticed that when my episode aired, they actually still edited things out. Like they didn't actually show the entire pitch, but everything they showed was like the most important parts,
I also noticed, I think it was the next morning that Daniel Lubetzky, the founder of Kind, had like tweeted about Nopalera. Like, what was it like to wake up to that? Like, was that kind of a nice little bonus in the morning?
Always. I was like, yes, fist bump, fellow Mexicano. And he obviously is a very nice person. I mean, he really is kind,
Yeah.
and he really is that way. And I think that he just, he wanted to support us, even though like no deal was made. He wanted to use his platform to help fuel business, or, people to our site or just anything. And so I really appreciated that. So I hope to one day be able to meet him and thank him.
Yeah. Well, and then I'd love to talk a little bit about your recent fundraise as, then as well. So that closed, by the time it aired, that had, closed. But can you tell us a little bit about kind of the fundraising process, anything that was kind of, surprising in there? I know you already mentioned a few things, but just kind of curious about some of your other insights, because I know everything that you do, which I love about you, like you're such a documenter, like you document everything. You're so intentional. So I'm like, if there's anybody I want to learn how they, how they went about the fundraise process, like your insights are, I know, just super helpful.
Yeah, well, I have to, chalk that up to being raised by a homicide detective, Jesse. So my father taught me to document everything. So that's why I'm such like a, crazy documenter. So I think one of my biggest learnings from the fundraise, just to like zoom out a bit, is to what I learned and what I experienced firsthand, which still kind of blows my mind, is that money begets money. Like once you have money, people want to give you more money. And this is both how life is and also why life is unfair. Right? Because the people that don't have the money are the ones that need it. And it's kind of like how people give things to celebrities for free. It's like they actually have money to buy things, but yet people will just want to give them things for free. And I always, in the back of my mind, I always think back to like Arlen Hamilton, the VC from Backstage Capital, who has an amazing story, right? She was like homeless, then she like, raised her first fund, and, she's a Black woman. And she always says like, if you don't have the money, you have to become the money. And that's truly what I experienced during my fundraise, because it really takes a lot of, audacity, courage, self-belief, mindset, everything to show up to these pitch meetings. And even though you are desperate for money, like, please, somebody give me $1,000, you have to show up like, I don't need it, like, nope, you need me. And that's how that's like the vibe that you have to bring to these meetings. Obviously, you also have to be extremely informed and like know all your numbers and all of that, but just the attitude, right? Because people want to invest in people with big ideas. People want to invest in visionaries who are going to, build the next, $100 million brand. People want to invest in CEOs who are going to build that, $1 million team, right? And so if you show up and you are not confident, like that does not give confidence to the investor to want to invest in you. So you can't wait for the money to be given to you to have the confidence. You have to have the confidence first, and then the money will come to you. And that is not easy, right? And not everyone is built for that type of pressure, So that was one of my biggest takeaways. I literally had zero contacts, Jesse, when I started. Like I did not even know, how do I even find the VCs? How do I find the people with the money? That was me, right? And now I'm on the other side where I literally have investors reaching out to me now, like literally like this week, someone just wrote to me, two people wrote to me, can I get on your list? You know, are you still taking investment? And I'm like, where were you back in June when I was like crying on the floor, you know? And it's because once people, also investors are just normal people with FOMO, right? So let's also say that they're not superior human beings. They're just people like everyone else. Nobody wants to be first on the dance floor. Yep. So once someone's first on the dance floor, everybody wants to get on the dance floor, right? Once you have, 2.7 million, then people are like, is it too late? I literally had to turn people down, like at the end of my fundraise, because I was like, I need this to close. I need the money to go into the bank. Like, but it's just that was wild to me, that and like being able to experience that was really wild. So how I met people was literally just, I enrolled in I applied to a lot of accelerators, any kind of cohort that would put me in the room with investors or people that knew investors, because once you meet one, Jesse, you meet three. Yeah. Just like because all the rich people hang out together, they play golf together, just like all the poor people know each other. It's literally the same. We all live in our economic bubbles. And they're no different. And so you just meet one and then they're like, oh, let me introduce you to so-and-so, but it does require effort on our part, the founders, to go put ourselves into new rooms.
Yeah. How long did it take from like when you're like, all right, I'm going to start fundraising to that, yes, where somebody's like, all right, I'm going to lead the round, and then kind of all the dominoes fall of everybody getting FOMO. Like how long was that process?
It felt like a million years, but it was not. It was really only like, I think I started, in June. So it was, and people warned me, they were like, the summer is a terrible time to raise. All the rich people are on vacation. And I was like, well, that's too bad because I need to raise. So it was a little slow, like in August, where I was like starting to get nervous, like, okay, I need people to write me back. I need, I need someone to say yes. And so it was like June, July, August, and then by September, it was when, I got the lead investor, and then the angels. I had already been kind of talking to angels, but the angels kind of came all in at once at the end, again, like that FOMO, like, so that was really interesting. Like two individual, like I have 6 angels, 2 individuals who actually work for the lead investor invested personally.
Oh,
and
wow.
So that was really fascinating because they're seeing the deal happen, right? They're part of that team, but they wanted to personally invest, right, as angels. So, I have 2 angels that are, that work for the lead investor, which is interesting.
Yeah. Wow. And what does it look like, kind of operationally, like, the day to day of doing that fundraising? Like, are you connecting with people via email? Is it video calls? Like, were there in-person events with like the accelerators and events you participated in, like getting in those, was it physical rooms you were sometimes getting in? And also as part of that, like, how did you intentionally kind of set up your team to make sure that the rest of the business kept running to give you enough bandwidth to do the fundraising that is so much work?
Yes, that last part is the hard part, right? Because most people that are fundraising for the first time, they don't have a team.
Yeah.
So you are like trying to do it all. And that is honestly the hardest thing. Because fundraising, as everyone tells you, is a full-time job. It's not like a full-time job, but it's like more than a part-time job.
Yeah.
I'll say it's like a 3/4 job. And I didn't meet anyone necessarily in person. I was mostly Zoom meetings, and just asking for introductions through other investors. I started, I joined Twitter to kind of follow other investors. A lot of VCs are on Twitter just to kind of follow what they're saying, what they're thinking, and there was definitely a lot of cold outreach, like, hi, you don't know me, but, so-and-so recommended you. Obviously, if you can ever get a warm lead, that's always the best. And a lot of investors say that. But again, when you're starting from the outside, like if you know no one, how are you supposed to start? You know what I mean? Like you need someone to first let you in the castle wall, to introduce you to someone so you can meet more people. So it's just a lot of cold outreach, a lot of emails, and then that hopefully led to Zoom meetings. And, using DocSend, for my pitch deck to be able to give people private links, that weren't downloadable. You don't want like millions of versions of your pitch deck floating around out into the universe, especially because you're always updating it. Like every time you have a meeting, you're like, okay, so that was interesting. They were confused about this point. Let me clarify that in the deck. I think by the end I was like on version 7 of my pitch deck.
Right.
So, so I'm glad that it's over. Like it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Also because I didn't know what I was doing, like if you've never done it, like you're just trying to understand, like, what is my valuation? Like what, and then you have to go on and present like, exactly what the next 5 years of your life are going to look like.
Right.
And so, in terms of my team was like 2 people at that point. So it was really like Sam, our marketing manager, me, and we had an intern helping her in marketing. So Edith, who's now full-time, was an intern at the time. And then my partner, Sean, who was like dealing with all like logistics, so I did have help. I wasn't like, wasn't a solo founder, but it's not like how it is now where we have like full-time VP of sales, full-time director of ops, so that's really challenging. Like my heart goes out to all founders who are in that like team of 1 or team of 2, like trying to run the business and also fundraise.
Yeah. Did you feel like your like sales experience helped come in handy with the sending emails, getting people to open a cold email, tracking your follow-ups? Like, I feel like there's so much similarities that like tenacity and systems you developed in sales would, even though it's really hard, would apply to the fundraising world a lot.
Oh, 100%. I think if you ever have any sales experience, it's so valuable because so much of it is no, 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 and just getting ignored that you can't be fazed by that, and you just really have to be like, you just know that all you need is one yes, so it's really just a math game. If for every 10 people you reach out to, one person writes you back, then that means you need to reach out to like 30 people if you want 3 people to get back to you. Do you know what I mean? It just becomes like a math game. So yeah, definitely that work in sales and also being a musician. Like I used to book my own tours and like so many people would ignore my emails, and then one person would write me back and, it felt great. So I have a lot of experience with rejection, and that is very, very useful.
Right. Yeah. And so when the fundraise round closes, how long from like, all right, it's full, nobody else can get in, no matter how much they want to get in, to like money in the bank minus, like you said, legal fees, which is just really important note. But like, how long did that take? Because I feel like it's another piece of like, all right, we raised a bunch of money, but like, it's another thing for everybody to actually wire transfer the money and it all to come and for you to be able to like start using it. How did that work?
Yeah, it wasn't, again, it felt like a million years, but it wasn't. Fortunately, my lead investor was generous enough to give us an advance, like a promissory note. I was like, I need $250K like tomorrow, like yesterday, actually, before like as we're waiting for the real money to come through. So they did. And that was super helpful because we had outstanding purchase orders. Like we had money, bills that were due, it was a really tight spot to be in. Like, it feels really weird to be like, you feel like you're about to go out of business, but like $2 million is about to be deposited into your bank account, and so luckily they gave me an advance. So that was great. And the only thing that slowed it up was like just paperwork. Like the more, I guess my advice to other founders is like all of your corporate documents, all of your, your board, all of those terms, have those done, and approved, because those are the things that can hold you up. So, and like the due diligence, one thing that I guess slowed us down a bit. Again, it wasn't long. It felt like a long time at the time, but it wasn't really. It was, the intellectual property piece. Like they just, I'd had, it was like the back and forth with the lawyers of just like, proving that the formulas were mine, proving that, whatever, and anything that could hold it back. Like those are the things that they're trying to comb through, right? Because they want to eliminate any kind of liability. So the more you can have those documents like done, then you will have those. That's the only thing that holds it back. It's like you get caught in diligence of like on some point that they need clarification on, and for me, like intellectual property was one of them.
Wow. So what does it look like using the funds that you raised over the next year? Like what are kind of the next steps in scaling? What's kind of next in your planning and executing?
Yeah, we just had our all hands team meeting this morning, actually. And we were talking about this point because, we still have all the money in the bank, right? Because we have made money, right? So it's like the balance hasn't really gone down. I mean, the balance went down in the beginning because we had bills due. So like a lot, like hundreds of thousands of dollars went out the door like immediately, but that was like that was last year, and so, we were talking about this, like, I am always wrestling with like, we need to, spend the money like to grow sales, but I also want to hold, I don't want to spend it too quickly because I want to endure the recession, whatever that is and however long that lasts. Like still no one really knows. I mean, we're all seeing the layoffs, massive tech layoffs everywhere, and but it's going to be different, than like the 2008 recession. Like it's not going to look the same, right? And so I think everyone is still trying to figure out like, what does this look like? What does this mean? And so it's like this balance of like spending the money, but also wanting to hold on to some of it. So really, what it allows for us to do is to first of all, hire people. Obviously, that's what everyone should do when they raise money. It's hire a team and then have a real marketing budget, because any CPG brand, in my opinion, is actually running a marketing company. And I think it's naive to think that we're running ingredient companies or product companies. Like pasta is pasta, right? Like soap is soap, like, yes, we all have differences in our like tweaks in our formulations, but it's ultimately brand, and it's like it's who we're talking to and how we're talking to them, and which is marketing, right? Marketing is like how we talk to people. So, having a real marketing budget and like really allowing ourselves to kind of dream of like, what are the things we'd like to do? What kind of activations would we like to have? Like, so we're starting to do like in-store activations. We're going to do, agile last mile trucks, which I know Wild Wonder is doing it as well, which are like, basically billboards on trucks, and, those are things that we would have never done before because we couldn't afford them, so doing those kinds of things, investing in software that makes our life easier, and, that's what we've spent the money on so far. Having like a better accountant obviously costs more money, so, and that's headcount, that's like team, hiring the right people, having the right systems, and having like an R&D budget. Like now we can, formulate new products, and, that takes time and money. So it's kind of everything. We're using the money for all of the things, that we really need,
Yeah. Getting all the building blocks and everything in place to continue to just be able to keep working up the ladder and scaling, because it can be easy to kind of try to skip a step or not set up some of those fundamental blocks. But if you can set them up, and you and your team are so good about like documentation, and I'm a systems nerd and everything, so I always appreciate what you share about building out systems and everything. And so I'm just that it's so important for scaling later. And the marketing piece is interesting too, like you said, because like we had Liquid Death on the show. It's a water company valued at $700 million. Like it's all branding. Like
that is like my favorite brand to talk about. It's just, I think everyone is just jealous of like how brilliant it is. I'm like, I just saw, where was I? I was in a store like over the weekend, and it was like, what was the name of the flavor? It was like Bury Me Alive, like berry, like BERRY. I was like on the floor. I was like, I am dead. Oh my God, this brand, like, couldn't they get any more brilliant? I can't take it.
I know.
And so I use the water category. It's literally my favorite category to explain the importance of brand, because it's water. There's one ingredient, and that ingredient is water. And if I pour out Liquid Death, Evian, Essentia, and Poland Spring all out into clear glasses, like they all look the same, because it's not about the goddamn ingredients.
No.
And I love the water category as that. It's like the perfect way to explain the importance of brand.
Yeah. Are there some new product innovations that you can share about that? Like any lines that you're sharing, or is it all still kind of in the works?
I think we're allowed to share. We are working on, because, as much as I wish that the whole world would switch to solids and we'd eliminate, everyone would stop buying body wash and, shampoo in plastic bottles of, most of it is water, right? So you're like buying plastic bottles filled with water. People love lotion and they love body wash. So we cannot deny people. We're not going to put it in plastic though. So we are going to put it in aluminum. Bottles that you will, refill. That we're going to make them beautiful, so you never want to throw them away. They're going to be like centerpieces of your bathroom. And so we're working on a body wash and a lotion. And obviously, being able to make minis of things is also a new expense that we're able to afford, because that's new molds, like the costing of the machinery to make minis of things, like mini soaps. We're going to make mini cactus soaps. Minis of the lotion, and and the body wash, like travel sets, or gift sets, discovery sets, whatever you want to call them. So those are all things in the works. And of course, people continue to ask us, for shampoo bars. So in the very early stages of exploring that. But the body wash and the lotion have been in the works for several months.
Nice. Oh, that's exciting. And I'm team shampoo bar. I got it. I gotta admit, I've been one of those people on Instagram. I was like, what would you like us to come out? Shampoo
bars. Yeah. What is your favorite brand? Do you have one that you like? I've tried a lot.
I mostly will buy whatever's at the farmer's market by our house, because then I could just, take it home, no packaging involved. But if I could buy it from Nopalera, I would do that instead.
We are working on it. Yeah, it's a tricky thing to formulate, because we obviously want to make them for different hair types, and they're tricky to make, because you want it to be hard so that it doesn't melt. But if it's like too hard, then you have to use ingredients that like make it drag on your hair, Anyway, I'm getting to like the weeds here. But yeah, we're early stages. I have a bunch of, concoctions in my kitchen right now, actually.
Nice. I love it. Because you have a formulation background. So which I also love that you invested in yourself and getting the formulation. So I think that's also so cool that you can still be involved in the formulation process and super informed and educated on it.
Yeah. Totally. So I tried to get rid of the formulation. My kitchen was a kitchen for a while there. I was like, I'm done with this. We have co-packers now. And now, like, again, I've kind of like commandeered half the kitchen for like a formulation lab.
I love it. Well, I hope everyone follows. If they don't already, I hope they follow along. Go to Nopalera, Nopalera.co. As the website. Follow nopalera.co on Instagram. You can go on Amazon, but get some Nopalera in your life if you haven't already. Watch the episode, which I'll link. I so appreciate you being here. I hope our listeners follow along and continue to keep following the journey. I'm super excited to, and just so grateful for everything that you've shared with. You're always sharing so much wisdom with the world. And just appreciate you so much. And you coming on the show and sharing with our Startup CPG audience, it means a lot. And I really appreciate you.
Oh, right back at you. I mean, what you guys have built, I feel like I was, in the Slack channel when it was like hundreds of people, and now it's like over 10,000 people. So it's just amazing, the community that you guys have built and the time and energy that you guys commit to helping one another. This kind of thing did not exist like 10 years ago, like everyone was literally on their own, suffering alone. And now, the community just really is just key, key to everyone's like survival, mental health, everything,
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for being here, and hope to see you in real life at some point as well.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you for listening in today. I'm so honored you joined me for this conversation, and I love hearing from you all with feedback, suggestions, or if you just want to say hi at podcast@startupcpg.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. If you liked this episode, we'd love for you to share it with a friend or colleague, subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and maybe even leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you aren't yet in our Slack community of founders and experts, we'd love to see you there. You can get the free invite at startupcpg.com and find all our other awesome resources there, like webinars, databases, the blog, the magazine, and virtual and in-person events. Today's intro and outro music were a special feature of guest Sandra's band, Pistolera. Keep listening to hear the whole song Nuevos Ojos featured in Season 4, Episode 12 of Breaking Bad. I'm Jessie Freitag, your host and producer, and on behalf of the whole team at Startup CPG, thank you for being here and see you next week.